Okay, these are the answers for the review B. I'm going to go over these as I go instead of working them out from the start, because you should have, if you had any questions, watched the video for review A, and this is kind of the same thing. So on number 1, we're going to factor. So I look for a GCF, so 3 and 30 have 3 in common. It also has an x, so take out the 3x. I'm left with x minus 10, which is answer choice B. Number 2, this has a 1 in front of it. There's no GCF in 1, 11, and 28 besides 1, so we do A, B, C. A times C is 28, B is 11, so my numbers are 4 and 7. Because A is 1, I can take the shortcut, so I get x plus 4, x plus 7. Number 3, again, A is 1, B is negative 6, C is 9. There's no GCF. A times C is 9. B is negative 6, so my numbers are negative 3 and negative 3. So because A is 1, I can take the shortcut. So I get x minus 3, x minus 3. That's not an answer choice, but this too means that that is written twice, so the answer is C. Number 4, A is 5, B is 24, C is negative 36. A times C is negative 180, B is 24. So my numbers are 30 and negative 6. Unfortunately, A is not 1, so I can't take a shortcut, so I write down the A and the C, and I fill in the middle with these two numbers from the x. I split it. The GCF of the left is 5x. I divide it out. GCF of the right is negative 6. I divide it out. I take my outside pieces and my repeated or inside piece, and that is answer choice A. 5, 6, and 7 ask you to simplify. 72 is not a perfect square. I know that because I get a decimal on my calculator. So I break it down. So I use 2 until I can't. Then I try 3. Once I hit 1, I'm done. I find my pairs. So I have a pair of 2s, a pair of 3s. That give me that 6. That 2's left, so it stays under the square root. 84, not a perfect square. If I type up my calculator, I get a decimal. So I use 2's. Then when I can't, I go to 3. I can't use 5, so I go to 7. Once I hit 1, I'm done. So I have a pair of 2's. And then I had a 3 and a 7 left over. That's where I got the 21. Number 7, it's a negative under the square root, which gives me the I. Square root of 81 is 9, so that's where the 9 comes from, but don't forget the I. Number 8, 10 is not a perfect square. I get a decimal on my calculator, so I break it down, but there's no pairs, unfortunately, which means there's nothing I can do, so it's the square root of 10. It's kind of like if I give you 1/2 and asked you to reduce it, nothing you can do. Number 9 is a very easy problem, so you're going to want to remember when you do this that the I is second decimal point down there at the bottom of your calculator. Type it in. You are going to get 11 minus 7i. Just put the negative in that box and you're good to go. Number 10, the 3 stays a 3, the minus stays a minus. Square root of 100 is 10, but you're going to have an I because of that. So we get 3 minus 10i. Number 11, again, straight to your calculator, but to get the I, you do second period or decimal, which is at the bottom of your calculator. And when you get the negatives, just put them in the box. It's not a big deal. Number 12, if I give you one solution, you should be able to find the other. So I circle the sign in front of the I piece, the imaginary piece. I write everything else down. Then one of these has to be positive and negative. So I have the negative, so I change it to positive. So my answer is B. 13 through 15, you're going to use the b squared minus 4ac, which will be on the board. So as you do these, you find your a, b, and c, plug it into this formula, and get a number. If it's a negative, it has two imaginary solutions. If it's a positive, it has two real solutions, and if it's 0, it has one real solution. So a good thing to write on your note card might be for numbers 13 through 15, if it's positive, it's 2 real. If it's negative, it's 2 imaginary. And if it's 0, it's 1 real. Starts the solving. So we're going to solve by factoring, which means we're going to factor, but then we're going to solve. So to factor, I find a GCF. There isn't one. So I do my x. A times c is 20. B is 12. My numbers are 2 and 10. Because a is 1, I can take my shortcut. And then once I have that is factoring. But now I have to solve. So I take this piece, set it equal to 0, and solve it. Got negative 2. This piece, set it equal to 0 and solve it, so I got negative 10. 17, same deal. A times c is 24, b is 11, so 3 and 8. But unfortunately, a is not 1, so I have to do it the long way. So I split the middle, take out the GCF. So I get x plus 4, the outside, 2x plus 3, the repeated pieces. So x plus 4 equals 0 gives me negative 4. 2x plus 3 equals 0 gives me negative 3/2. 18, I look for a GCF first, always. I have one, it's x. That leaves me nothing to factor. So I take x equal to 0 and my other piece equal to 0. So 0 is an answer, which means I can eliminate a and b. And then once I get this piece, then I know my answer is D. 19 starts the solve by taking the square root, which in my opinion may be the hardest part. So your step 1 on these is to isolate your x squared. So I subtracted 4 divided by negative 3. Then step 2 is to do the square root. Don't forget your plus or minus. So I take square root of negative 4. The negative, there's my plus or minus. The negative gives me the I. Square root of 4 is 2. 20, same thing. I got to get rid of the 4, so I divide. I take the square root. I broke down 8, so I got a pair of 2's. And then I have to add 5, so I get a 5 plus or minus 2 square root of 2. So that one's a little more messy, but honestly, you should be able to do that, especially after you've done it twice right before taking the test. 21, same deal. We would add 8, divide by 5, then we got to break down. 6 doesn't break down though, so I get a plus or minus and a square root of 6. So on 19 through 21, every one of your answers should have a plus or minus somewhere in it. 22 enters the quadratic formula stage. So the quadratic formula will be on the board, but it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And honestly, there's not much to do other than put in your pieces. So you always do the discriminant first, and then you plug in the rest. So negative 3 plus or minus square root of negative 79 over 2 times 2. So the negative 3 gives me negative 3 gives me positive 3. 2 times 2 gives me 4. The negative square root of 79, the I is there because it was negative. 79 is not going to break down. So I'm just going to leave it. And if you get this far, then you've gotten full credit. 23, same deal. Get 29 for the discriminant. I plug everything else in. A negative 3 is a positive 3. 2 times 5 is 10. 29 is not going to break down. So I'm not testing your breaking down the radical here. I'm testing your quadratic formula. (24) So remember, when you do these, you're going to put the equation in y equals in your calculator. And then to do the x-intercepts, you're going to do second trace. You're going to choose number 2. You have to give it boundaries. So my answer is 1.2. So on the graph, I should tell it to do between 1 and 2. And enter, and it'll spit out that. And then on this one, second trace number 2, I would tell it to do between 6 and 7. Enter, and it'll spit out my answers. The y-intercept I get from the table. So if I go to my table, where x is 0, it'll say -4. That's how I get that answer. And then my maximum or minimum, it looks like this, so it's going to have a maximum. So I'm going to do second trace number 4, which is maximum. It should look like it's at 4, so I'll tell it to go between 3 and 5. So 3 enter, 5 enter, and it'll spit out something that rounds to 4. The last one, I have to be sure I set up the equation. So this will get you half the credit doing this part. And it's right here. Revenue minus cost. So this is revenue. This is cost. Those are up here. And then it asks you for the maximum. That would be second trace number 4. And on your picture, it should look like it's between... It should look like it's at about 3, so I would probably tell it to look between 2 and 4. So 2 enter, 4 enter, and it'll spit out something like 2.9, 9.10. The profit is the second, the output, so it's $9.10 is the one you're looking for. So this was your second review. Remember that these get you 2 bonus points each. So possibility of 4 bonus points. Be sure you know what you're doing. We'll spend a few minutes tomorrow reviewing, but not very much time. Just be sure you're ready. And don't forget to make your note card.